Okay, this will probably be my biggest and my most important video until now. I'm going to talk, once again, about the most questioned, the most valued, the most discussed, the most difficult, the most counterintuitive, and the most important question of all times. What is the source of all of reality? This is and will be my most favorite question for the rest of my life, because the answer to this question literally solves all of existence for once and for good. And I regard this as my life duty. I came into existence to solve it, to find out the truth, to discover the source. That's my only mission and my only true passion. Anyway, so let's begin. So the concept of God, the concept of objectivity and absolute truth, or any other abstract term that refers to the source of reality, are basically all synonymous in my opinion. But to begin with, I will just use the term objectivity. So, objectivity is of course the opposite of subjectivity, and subjectivity is, with respect to its common definition, a relative and personal point of view solely based on how the individual perceives and interprets its environment through its own senses in a particular point in space and time. Something along those lines. And objectivity would be the sum total of all the possible subjective points of view. And I don't know about you, but I think that there are an infinite amount of possible subjective points of view. So, objectivity is equal to an infinite amount of subjective perspectives, and in this way, it holds every piece of information that can ever be obtained throughout the universe, throughout time. And something that contains every piece of information is something what religious people would define as God. Now, interestingly, the difference between God as the sum total of all possible individual perspectives and only one individual perspective is the embodiment of the self. Every individual has a self with which it identifies. Just like you and me, we identify ourselves as a separate individual with our own personal perspective. But speaking from the perspective of objectivity or God, so the sum total of all possible perspectives, the sum total of an infinite amount of individuals, the individual or the self would disappear. Because if God were an individual, he would have his own subjective point of view. But since God is objective, he must be selfless. He can't be an individual. Now, being selfless or losing your sense of individuality would create the experience of dying. Your whole life is based on the sense of your subjective individuality. But if you really are interested in chasing objectivity, your individuality must come to an end. In other words, you have to die. Or at least you have to experience the effect of dying, the experience of selflessness. Once you are able to experience total selflessness, then you will know what objectivity is. Then you will know what God is. So now we're getting a little bit closer to the truth. Another thing about selflessness that also must be understood is that you don't experience yourself anymore as yourself in reality. All you experience is reality, but not yourself as a subjective fragment of reality. In other words, there really is no more difference between yourself and reality. There literally is no more difference between you and all of reality. Your sense of self becomes equivalent to the entire universe. So since God is selfless, his sense of self is universal. Not only did he create the universe, his sense of self is literally his own creation. He does not look down upon his creation, he literally is his creation. The biggest mistake we make is believing in one supernatural being who created the universe and who looks down upon his own creation. But that's bullshit. God is not a being beyond space and time. He is literally his own creation. He is the embodiment of infinite subjectivity. So why did he create the universe? Well, he didn't. Because he's not an individual. God is nobody. Therefore, nobody created the universe. When you die and you become selfless, you will realize that you are God, that you are nobody. You will realize that you are all of reality, and you will realize that you are creation itself. No, you did not invent the universe. You did not come up with this brilliant idea to create the universe, in the sense that you are an individual with an individual brain that invented it. No, that's not how creation works. The universe could only be created through selflessness. No brains were necessary for this process. The universe can only be created when nobody exists. The universe can only be created when you lose your sense of self, so that there is no longer this distinction between yourself and your creation. Alright? That is the only way to come into contact with your own creation, by literally being it. But when you are it, you can't see it, because there is no more you looking from a subjective point of view. You see? It's only when you are dead that you are creating the universe, and you are creating it completely effortlessly and spontaneously, and without even being aware of it. So you're not even doing anything. There is no labor to the creation of reality. God didn't do shit to create the universe. It was that easy. Not a single thought was required to create it. You have to notice that it works the total opposite way than how we think it works. We think that the universe is so immensely complicated. We have been thinking about it for thousands of years. We have developed extremely complicated mathematical systems in order to understand the universe. But we will always fail to discover the ultimate absolute objective truth. Because the truth is everything but complicated. It's the most simple thing. And ironically, the most simple thing tends to be the most complicated thing. It's so simple because all you have to do is precisely nothing. Absolutely nothing. God did absolutely nothing to create the universe. So, when you become God, you become nobody. Your sense of self becomes a universal sense of selflessness, which means that you don't consider yourself anymore as an inhabitant of the universe. There is just the universe, but no you located in the universe. So the universe will become a thing by itself without reference because it is the only thing that exists. There is nothing else that it can compare itself with, which means that it becomes utterly indefinable and utterly unknown. Right now, you can refer to yourself because there is everything else that you can use as a reference to compare yourself with. You are you because you can distinguish yourself from me. But the universe as a whole, or existence as a whole, has nothing else to compare itself with. So it will never be able to tell itself that it is the universe. It will never be able to tell itself that it is itself. Therefore, it is once again a selfless thing. It can never know itself. So God doesn't know itself because in reality there is no self. The next thing that you should understand about selflessness slash God slash objectivity is that it is timeless. Because objectivity contains the whole of existence, including all of time, the entire past, and the infinite future. Time is only applicable for subjective individuals. Each second is another point of view and therefore relative and subjective. So to ask the question, when did the universe came into being? Well, it came into being in no time. Just like no brain power was required for the universe to come into being, time was also not required, which means it was created within zero amounts of time units. So it happened instantaneously because there was no time. When you are selfless, you do not experience time because, again, time is a property of your subjective individual self. So basically, being selfless is being all of infinite time at once. There is no past, there is no future, there is only the eternal timeless moment in which all of time is compressed into the singularity ball. So I know that all of this sounds pretty far-fetched, and it sounds like this new age, unscientific, pseudo-spiritual enlightenment nonsense, as you might want to call it. But somehow the logic of objectivity is pushing me towards this conclusion. So again, what is objectivity? Let's look at it from the scientific point of view, in which objectivity is this universal formula that operates every possible relative and subjective situation or perspective. For example, you can apply the laws of gravity to any kind of planet. You can calculate the gravitational pull between any given planets, including an infinite amount of hypothetical planets. In other words, the universal law of gravity can be applied to an infinite amount of planets, and the only difference between the law of gravity and the planets is that the law of gravity remains the same, and all the planets are all different. They all have different sizes, different masses, different momentums, etc. But the law of gravity will always be exactly the same. In other words, objectivity is always the same and does not change, and will never change, while subjectivity changes all the time. And since the formula contains the true answer of an infinite amount of planets, all these planets basically revolve around the formula. Now, and when we talk about a theory of everything, we suppose that we could compress all of physics into one unified formula that could explain all of existence. So there is this one objective formula that could describe everything within existence. Just one singular formula, which never changes, and it is responsible for the way existence manifests itself through an infinite amount of relative changing situations. And these infinite amount of relative situations literally revolves around the singular objective formula, which doesn't move and is stationary. It literally is like a galaxy in which the center of a black hole is the objective formula and everything else revolves around it. And of course this makes sense. This objective formula is the truth. It is God, and everything in existence is attracted towards truth. In other words, relativity is attracted towards absolutism. Subjectivity is attracted towards objectivity. Change and movement are attracted towards stagnation. Inequality is attracted towards equality. Energy or entropy are attracted towards equilibrium, etc. Now back to the theory of everything. What would a universal unified formula look like if it could explain infinitely everything? Well, there is a significant problem here that we have to solve first. If it could explain everything, it must also be able to explain itself. The objective formula must be able to explain itself. Otherwise, it couldn't explain everything, right? But the paradoxical problem here is that it is impossible to integrate itself into itself. So this objective formula exists by itself as an independent thing, and it must basically swallow itself into itself in order to explain itself. You see? Because otherwise it would have to make a clone of itself in order to swallow its clone, in order to explain its clone. Get it? But you can't have two objective formulas. Nope. There is only one objective formula, and it would have to swallow itself to explain itself. But that's impossible. And therefore it is literally impossible for it to explain itself. In other words, the absolute truth cannot explain itself, and therefore it doesn't know itself. Once again, objectivity itself doesn't know that it is objectivity. And therefore it is once again selfless, because it just cannot refer to itself. This is one of the most significant and the most profound logical truths that you really must acknowledge very, very well. So since absolute truth cannot know itself, every possible theory of everything that we can interpret will never be the truth. Nothing within existence can refer to the truth. And since nothing can refer to the truth, it is absolutely free to go. It is absolutely uncontrollable. Not even the truth itself is in control of itself. Like it is absolutely uncontrollable. Nobody literally controls it. Nobody, not even itself. And because it's so uncontrollable, it has no limits. Because nothing can limit it to control it. Because to control something means you have to grab it by its limits. But it is fundamentally uncontrollable, therefore it's unlimited. So even existence is not in control of it. Non-existence is not in control of it, because both existence and non-existence are a product of it. Everything that is a product of this uncontrollable objectivity is not in control of it, including the concept of existence and non-existence, including the concept of uncontrollable and objectivity. Notice that when we use the concept uncontrollable, that we use it to control this unknown thing, because by saying that it is uncontrollable, we have defined it and given it something that we can understand, that we can control within our capability to think about it. But that's not what it means to be truly uncontrollable. That's literally beyond our controllable understanding. So, the term uncontrollable contradicts itself, and any term basically that we use to describe the truth with will always contradict itself as well. I will give you some more examples. The term God, or whatever term we use to describe a deity with, contradicts itself, because every religious person will tell you that God is beyond our understanding. The only problem is that they don't realize that the statement God is beyond our understanding is formulated within our limited understanding. So talking about something which we can't understand from the point of view from understanding is a contradiction. If it is truly beyond our understanding, then it is incorrect to state that it is beyond our understanding, because that is yet another way to understand it from our point of view, by saying that it is beyond our understanding. You get it? Therefore, all religions are basically contradicting themselves. So this uncontrollable objectivity neither exists nor doesn't exist, because it is free from existence and non-existence. It's free from any logical laws and rules that we address to it. It's free from any properties that we ascribe to it. Yes, it's also free from the laws of physics, because the laws of physics originate out of the truth, and the truth itself can't be touched by anything. So it can be touched by rules and laws. It can be controlled by anything. Get it? Now that we know that nothing can control it, the truth will turn itself into an infinite explosion of everything that could ever be possibly created. It does this because it can't control itself. That's why it unleashes an explosion of pure infinity. When there is no external control whatsoever, it does literally everything it could ever do, and it will do an infinite amount of things all at once. There is nothing that can stop it from doing infinitely everything, because there is zero control. Man. So, if you weren't controlled by gravity, you would have the freedom to float around, for example. And if you weren't controlled by speed and distance, you would have the freedom to travel anywhere in the universe in an instant. If you weren't controlled by anything, you would have the freedom to do an infinite amount of possible things. In fact, you would be so totally free to do anything, you would do everything that you could ever do all at once, because you're also free from time. You're also free from desire. So it's not that you desire to create an infinite amount of things, because there is no subjective individual. So this infinite creation is completely inevitable. It didn't ask for it, but it also didn't reject it. And that's precisely what happened. That's why the universe exists. Because it has been created by something which is utterly uncontrollable and utterly free. That's the only way how all of this is possible. It has been created by perfection. And we define perfection as being infinitely free with zero restrictions. Well, guess what? It is this ultimate perfection that has caused the universe. So, something which is absolutely uncontrollable and free has created an infinite amount of controllable and limited realities. Something without laws, without restrictions, without boundaries, without rules, has created an infinite amount of realities with laws, limitations, boundaries, and rules. So you see, the truth itself has no limitations. But everything it creates does have limitations because only the truth itself can be unlimited. So it's like when you turn the truth inside out, what you will get is its opposite. So there is only one objective truth, and it's absolutely unlimited, and its opposite is not one, but an infinite amount of limited realities. And our universe is just one of the infinite amount of possibilities. Now, once this infinity has been spawned into being, all of it will start to revolve around the one and only objective truth, which acts like a universal attractor, a universal force. So everything in existence is attracted towards the truth. Alright, I'm gonna end the video with yet another conclusion, some kind of a summary of this video. So, what is the source of all of reality? Well, the truth is an infinite paradox. Trying to find it is paradoxical. You will always collide towards paradoxes, and paradoxes are self-destructive. Truth is self-destructive. Why? Because it doesn't like a subjective point of view. The self must be destroyed. The subjective point of view must be destroyed, and the truth will take care of it once you discover it. Once you actually discover it. So the source of reality is a paradox in its purest form, when talking from the perspective of a subjective individual. So, does a subjective individual exist? Well, that's also part of the paradox. Does a paradox exist? Well, that's also part of the paradox. A paradox is a paradox is a paradox is a paradox ad infinitum. Everything being said here is a paradox. Even that sentence just right there. Including this one. Including this one. Including this one. Ad infinitum. And I will only stop until I cease to exist as an individual. Thanks for listening.